Hi, my name is Melissa Ridenour, and I am the author of the book Scary Ghosts and Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight. Let me tell you a little bit about myself first, and then I'll tell you why I wrote this book. I'm a retired school teacher and retired school librarian, and in that capacity as a teacher and a librarian, I learned a lot about children's tastes in books. And after retiring from teaching and being a librarian, I decided I wanted to still stay involved in children's lives in some capacity or another. So I started writing children's books. I have 4 published children's books. And all of my books, the goal of all my books is to educate, empower, entertain, or motivate and inspire. And the book, Scary Ghosts, Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight, really accomplishes almost all 4 of those, but especially accomplishes the goal of entertaining and educating as well, because at the end of the book there's a little educational part that will teach children a little bit about whether or not ghosts really exist. As my experience as a school librarian, I found that the most popular books by children who visited my library were the ghost books. Couldn't even keep them on the shelves. They wanted them all the time. And then as my experience as a mother and a grandmother, my own children, when they were small, as well as my grandchildren who were small, would often implore me to tell them a story. Something scary, but not too scary. So I thought, I want to write a ghost story which has stories in it that are a little bit scary, but not too scary. And that's why I wrote Scary Ghosts, Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight, because it's divided into 2 parts. The first 3 stories are stories that are a little bit scary, but not too scary. And then the second part of the book are the stories that are about playful ghosts, who are more like ornery and mischievous ghosts. So the children will have fun with those. And then there's a third part of the book, which is a nonfiction part of the book, which addresses the concept of whether or not ghosts really exist or they don't exist. It's researched and it gives information by those who are believers of ghosts and those who are non-believers, and why. So children can read that chapter and decide for themselves what they think. It's illustrated. This book is illustrated by Sangamitra Dasgupta. She is an internationally known and awarded illustrator. She's illustrated so many books and won so many awards nationally and internationally, too numerous to mention. Her illustrations, you can see, are even from a distance on a bookshelf, would draw children in. Because the book is meant for middle school to teenage readers, the inside of the book has just black and white chapter illustrations. For instance, the first chapter, part 1, which is Scary Ghosts, is called The Haunted Toy Chest. See her illustration, there's the toy chest and the little doll. And then the second chapter, which is another of the scary stories, is called Bloody Mary Worth. Now this is one that's based on an urban legend, which I have taken poetic license with and created additional characters and put in additional incidents and things and kind of made it my own. The third one is one called The Little Old Lady and the Big Hairy Toe. That's the shortest one in the book, and it's one that's kind of fun, a little bit scary, but kind of fun for kids. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, if you'll indulge me, and read that one to you in just a little bit. And then the part 2 is the more playful ghost. This one's called Isabella's Imaginary Friend. Little girl, a little ghost. She's haunted by a little ghost. She's very mischievous. And then this one's very interesting. Chapter 5 is a playful ghost called West Virginia Tommyknockers. This story is set in an old tiny coal mine. You can tell that by the miner's helmet he has on and the way that they shovel coal. And a Tommyknocker is a ghost, supposedly, according to coal miner legend. A Tommyknocker is a ghost that haunts coal mines. And if miners have any indication of a Tommyknocker being in the mine, they usually try to run for safety, because it usually means something bad is going to happen. And then the last one is called A Ghostly Car Ride. It's a mischievous ghost too, and you can see by the looks of the ghost, it's not too scary. Then the final chapter is illustrated. It's the one that has to do ghosts really exist? You see the little girl's peeking up the little ghost skirt. She wants to find out if ghosts really do exist. I want to tell you a little bit about, give you some endorsements that are on the back of the book, and then later on I'll read a review of it as well. But it's about 6 ghostly tales that will delight children, and has a chapter discussing the question of ghostly apparitions. An imaginary friend, a haunted attic, a cursed mirror, gremlins in a coal mine, an unfortunate meal, and a car propelled by a ghost. Melissa Ridenour presents 6 supernatural tales with a discussion setting out both sides of the paranormal question. Do you believe? Let your children decide with this entertaining book. And I have about 4 or 5 endorsements, but they put 2 of them on the back of the book. And I'll just very quickly read those to you before I go on with it, telling you a little bit more about the book. Scary Ghosts and Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight is a collection of invigorating tales that will delight children, young and old, who love the thrill of the unknown. Melissa Ridenour does an incredible job describing the scenes of these tales, creating an image for the reader that gives the tale a moody boost, sucking the reader in and making them wonder if the story they've read is true or not, but bring peace to the restless souls. Scary stories around the campfire have been traditions for many years and for many people. This book will be a welcome addition to these occasions. The tales are short, to the point, descriptive, fun, and at times bone-chilling. It gives the reader food for thought while entertaining them as well. And this endorsement was written by Renee Hand, who's an award-winning author of children's interactive mysteries. And then one more short endorsement. Scary Ghosts and Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight, is a clever premise coupled with the lively writing of Melissa Ridenour. Ghosts turn up where readers least expect them, and readers will delight in their antics such that it does not deny even the most sensitive child the fun of a good ghost story. And that one was written by Stacy Von Hutton, author of Moonbeam Award-winning book Shovelful of Sunshine, which also deals with West Virginia coal mines. I want to read to you just a little bit of the introduction of the first story, Scary Ghosts, Playful Ghosts, just to show how the writing in it is not too scary, but it can draw the reader in. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it so you can see how it can captivate the reader and make them want to read on in the book. And this is the very first part of the haunted toy chest. Their house had many gables and a castle-like attic tower that traced an eerie outline in the black night against the orange and golden glow of the moon. The house almost seemed to have a life of its own, its telltale heart strangely seeming to beat rhythmically, thump, 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 from high atop the hill where it sat, sad and sullen. Its many stained glass windows were like piercing, glistening, multicolored eyes that kept wary watch over the valley below. But the house didn't seem spooky to Ethan at all. What he liked best about his Grandma and Gramps' house was that it was big and rambling, with many nooks and crannies to explore. Since his mother and father's divorce, Ethan and his mother moved in with Grandpa and Gramps. The 4 of them, Grandma, Gramps, Ethan, and his mom, were the only inhabitants in the house. Or were they? And then that entices the child to want to read on. Now I want to read to you a story that's a little bit less scary, but kind of a fun story, and it's one that children always like. I'll read it because it's the shortest one in the book, to give you an idea of how the stories all differ into whether how scary they are, or how mischievous they are, or how silly they are. And this one is called The Little Old Lady and the Big Hairy Toe. This is also based on urban legend, which I have made into a story by adding characters and adding incidents. The little old lady lived in a lone, tiny cottage on the edge of some very dense, dark, and spooky-looking woods. The little old lady, Gertrude was her name, didn't have any neighbors nearby, though people lived in a village on down the road. To the people in the village, the little old lady was known as Granny Gert, even though Granny Gert had no children, grandchildren, or any family at all. Granny Gert was very frail and hunched over. Her aged and aching bones made it necessary for her to walk with a walking stick that she had found in the woods. Her walking stick was just as crooked and twisted as Granny Gert's crooked and twisted, teeny, tiny body. Granny Gert was very lonely, living in the little cottage on the edge of the woods. People from the village very seldom visited her. Granny decided one day that maybe If she could bake a delicious pie, she could invite a few people from her village over for a nice visit. But Granny Gert was very poor. She barely had enough food to feed herself, much less bake a delicious pie. Oh dear, what can I do? Granny Gert thought to herself. I would so much love to have somebody come to visit me, but I have nothing to offer any visitors. Suddenly Granny Gert snapped her bony little fingers and exclaimed excitedly, I know! I'll go into the woods and try to find some berries to bake a nice visitor pie. Granny Gert wrapped her tattered, shabby shawl around her shoulders and fumbled feebly at covering her little gray head with a ragged, scruffy old wool scarf. Grabbing her twisted little old walking stick and a big basket, Granny Gert headed out the cottage door and made her way ever so slowly along the winding path that led into the deep, dark woods. Granny Gert gathered lots of berries in the forest to make a berry pie. She also found some edible roots that she could use to add to the vegetables that she had in her cottage. While digging up the roots, Granny Gert stumbled across something very strange lying among the twigs and leaves. Using her walking stick, she poked at the odd object and turned it over a couple of times, examining it closely and curiously. Oh my, Gert said to herself and to any forest creatures within hearing distance. Why, I believe this is a big old toe. Her voice betrayed a combination of both a bit of giddiness and a bit of fear and foreboding at her discovery. Granny Gert didn't understand how a big old hairy toe came to be lying there in the forest, but she did know that since it was such a big and fat toe, it would probably provide her with meat which she didn't have in her cottage. Granny Gert picked up the big old hairy toe, exclaiming, I will go home and cook this up into a big pot of stew and have a delicious supper tonight. Then I will bake a berry pie, and in the morning I will go into town and invite a couple of the villagers over for pie and a friendly visit. Much pleased with her find and her plan, she hobbled slowly through the forest back to her humble little cottage. First, Granny mixed together the roots, vegetables, and the meat from the big old toe into a big kettle, and as it boiled and bubbled, she went about baking her berry pie. The aroma of the baking pie, mingling with the simmering stew, made for a very odd smell emanating from Granny Gert's cottage. When the stew finished cooking, she sat down to the first really hearty meal she had eaten in a long time. The heavy meal soon made the little old lady quite drowsy. She crawled into her teeny bed and burrowed her teeny twisted old body beneath the covers. Granny Gert soon drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the wonderful visit from the villagers the next day would bring. As Granny Gert slumbered, snoring softly, the wind was blowing the tree branches that appeared to be etched in the moonlight like long, dark, bony, gnarly fingers seemingly clutching and clawing at the orange and golden moon, as if to snatch it right out of the ever-so-black midnight sky. She didn't hear the branches that were, with the wind, tapping against the shutters, almost as if to wake and warn her of something scary and sinister about to occur. Granny Gert did awaken, though, with quite a start, as she heard thunderous stomping sounds from outside the door of her cottage. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The pounding clomps and stomps seemed to shake the very ground upon which they heavily trod. A booming voice bellowed from outside Granny Gert's door that caused her to duck beneath her blanket and cover her head and ears in an attempt to muffle the horrifying sound. She shivered in terror beneath her blanket as the booming voice thundered, Hairy toe, hairy toe. Who has my big old hairy toe? I want my big old hairy toe. Then there was a complete silence. The stillness made Granny Gert feel brave enough to peek from beneath her blanket. She eyed the door and listened carefully to see if there would be any more clamorous clomping or thunderous threats from the other side. Just as Granny Gert began to think there was no more danger, suddenly the door came crashing down to the floor, splintered and broken into little pieces. In the doorway stood a most horrifying, huge and hairy creature. His gigantic body cast a massive shadow across the teeny tiny bed from which Granny Gert startled and sat bolt upright. Certainly this creature was unlike any of the little forest creatures to which Granny Gert had become accustomed. His hairy body was more human in shape, and his piercing coal-black eyes fixed upon the little woman as he opened his massive mouth, revealing sharp, jagged teeth from which dripped disgusting drool as he horrifyingly howled, "You! You are the one! You have taken my big old hairy toe!" With those roaring accusations, the old woman confessed courageously, "Yes, I found your big fat old hairy toe, and I ate it in a stew." Then the teeny tiny old woman clambered quickly from her teeny tiny bed and crawled beneath it in an attempt to shelter herself from the looming creature as it slowly approached the bed. The last thing the old woman saw from beneath the bed was the scary silhouette of the hulking, hairy creature as he slowly ducked down beside the bed where Granny Gert cowered. The next day, a passing woodsman noticed the broken down door of Granny Gert's cottage. Curious, the woodsman looked inside the cottage, but Granny Gert was nowhere to be found. The only thing the woodsman witnessed were huge footprints on the ground in front of the cottage door. Curiously enough, one of the footprints was missing a big toe, and Granny Gert, well, sadly, she was never, ever to be seen again. So that's the story of Granny Gert and the big old hairy toe. And then the last chapter is the chapter that delves into whether or not ghosts really exist or not exist. One part of it is the believers, is information and research about those who believe and those who don't believe. So children can read that and decide for themselves about whether or not they believe. I wanted to share with you one more quick review of the book, because the book, Scary Ghosts, Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight, published by Crimson Coat Publishing, was reviewed by Reader's Favorite and got a 5 out of 5 stars. And the review was written by Hillary Hawks for Reader's Favorite. Scary Ghosts and Playful Ghosts, Children's Tales of Fright and Delight by Melissa Ridenour consists of 6 fun and scary ghost tales for children. In the haunted toy chest, Ethan and his Gramp uncover more than they bargained for when they decide to clear out the attic and move some old toys from a trunk into the garage. Running footsteps, eerie wailing sounds, and toys that get mysteriously moved. Who is Rosie? Spelled out in the alphabet brick letters. Bloody Mary Worth is a scary story about the imaginary stories from 4 girls tell each other at their slumber party. Could the spooky predictions of one storyteller actually come true? They soon find out. The old lady in the big hairy toe tells of the fate of old Gertrude when she comes across a large toe and decides it would go well into her stew pot. In Isabella's imaginary friend, and in West Virginia Tommyknockers, the ghosts of those who lived in the past make themselves known. The final story is the hilarious A Ghostly Car Ride, where Bobby discovers that, in some cases at least, ghostly happenings can have a more logical explanation after all. Melissa Ridenour has written an enjoyable mixture of tales, some stemming from her own imagination, while others are her own unique versions of urban legends or anecdotes. All are mysterious and strange enough to delight and intrigue young lovers of ghostly tales without being too frightening or unpleasant. The characters in each story are likable and believable. Their concerns and predicaments are understandable. While entertaining with some funny as well as more serious moments, the stories also convey some insights into people and human character. Our curiosity, our often disbelieving natures, and the way the consequences of our actions will always catch up with us, as well as desires to make peace or to make amends. At the end of the book, there's some interesting information about the theories of how and why there might or might not really be any such thing as ghosts, and the reader is left to decide for him or herself. An enjoyable read, ranking 5 out of 5 possible stars. And I want to note also as well that in addition to this review, Scary Ghosts and Playful Ghosts had been listed in my author interview posted on the prestigious book club reading list Novel Finds. And additional endorsements, besides in addition to the 2 that I read on the back of the book, can be found within the book itself, as well as listed on the endorsements page of my author website. I wanted to mention that when I had my grandchildren here, after the book was published and was reading, and they decided they always read to them, or have the older one read to the younger one before they go to bed. And the older one, who was about 11 at the time, decided that she wanted to do the ghost stories, and she'd already read them. She was in about the third or fourth grade, I believe, and she and her friends had already read one, and she told me when we were getting ready to have a bedtime story, she said, my friend and I read that first story, The Haunted Toy Chest, and she said, which about the little girl with the footsteps they would hear running across the attic and the toys being moved mysteriously. She said, after we read that story, she said, I was terrified even walking near my attic, much less going up into the attic of my house. And every time I'd go past the attic, I would imagine I would hear some little footsteps up there. So it had a kind of impact on her for a while, but it wasn't too traumatic. And the younger one, who was about 4 or 5 at the time, when the older one and I were discussing the story, she said to me, Glammy, because that's what they call me, she said, Glammy, did you write these stories? And I said, yeah, I wrote these stories. She said, bad Glammy. So anyway, I think she's gotten over that now and enjoys the stories since she's a little bit older. But I wanted you to know also that I have a website, Melissa Harker Ridenour Children's Books, and the address is www.authormelissaharkerridenour.com. If you go to that website, you will see that it's a pretty massive website. It has one page just for the fiction books, one page for the nonfiction books, a page for kids, a page for parents. It has links to the blogs, because every one of my books has a blog connected to it, to which I post things, including Scary Ghosts, Playful Ghosts. It has a blog as well called Ghosts the Blog, and when I post new blog posts to it, it's usually some kind of a ghost story or anecdotes or actual ghost stories that supposedly happened that I post onto the blog site. So that's kind of fun. So there is a link for to the blogs for each of my books. On the kids page, there are all kinds of videos and games and puzzles that they can play that are related to all 4 of my books. And on the parents page, there are resources and links that they can use to help them motivate their children to read and help them deal with other things that the children need to deal with in regard to all 4 of the books, which are meant to educate, empower, entertain, motivate, or inspire. So I hope you will take a look at the website, Melissa Harker Ridenour Books, at www.authormelissaharkerridenour.com, and consider there are links to purchases there too, which can be purchased at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and other places. So I hope you'll consider maybe purchasing the book for your children or even for yourself, and give it a try. And I so much appreciate you dropping by to listen to me tell you about my book. Have a great day. Bye.